Welcome to Water Talk with Paul the Waterman, brought to you by Water Pros. Paul the Waterman is Colorado's expert on all things related to the water we use and drink in our homes. Have you ever thought about where your water actually comes from? Is it safe to drink? Is it harmful to my health, my skin, or my hair? Paul the Waterman knows water, and he has the answers. So get ready to talk to the Waterman yourself right now. Call in with your questions to talk with your host, Paul the Waterman.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Water Talk. I'm Paul the Waterman. Happy New Year. Glad to have you with us today. If you'd like to call in with questions or comments, I'd love to talk to you. You can call us here at 303-477-5600. So what a year it has been. One of the things that we've learned in the last few weeks, I've learned especially, was how extent and the dangers of the forever chemicals. PFAS, PFAS, PFOS, and then also Gen X chemicals. And then there was a chemical we learned about that started it all, and it was called C6. And it's polyfluoroalkyl. That's a mouthful. And this was created by 3M Corporation along with DuPont. And this is something that it's a man-made chemical. It was used, after World War II in the 1940s. They were found in products such as the nonstick cookware, Teflon. And we heard, at the DuPont plant, there was a lady who was pregnant working in that Teflon department, and had a baby, a boy, who had to have multiple surgeries. And we heard, as he's an adult now, he's with his own family, he still has PFAS contamination in his body. PFAS are also in the stain-resistant fabrics and firefighting foam. So that means we have a concern here in Colorado because all the forest fires or the firefighting foam used to fight forest fires have the PFAS contamination. The PFAS are incredibly, persistent in the environment. They're present everywhere in our bodies, in the grass, in the trees, the fruit, the vegetables, the animals. It's all over, and it builds up in our bodies, and it's a product that does not break down, nor does it deteriorate. So the acidic water doesn't even break down, PFAS, PFOs, or Gen X chemicals. And because they don't break down easily, that's why they're called forever. They're going to be in our environment for years to come. We have contaminated soil concerns regarding PFAS. And so what's happened is bio-waste. Bio-waste comes from waste treatment plants. So all the human waste that's removed out of the water, and then, of course, they recycled that water and give it right back to us. But all the human waste was sold or given away. Most of it was given away free to farms that, was full of PFAS contamination. And today we're going to hear a story about a farmer in Michigan and what happened with him and surrounding farmland and testing. And here's an interesting fact about this. During the last couple of shows when we were bringing this, really to the forefront attention on how bad it was, they started, and it kind of confused me a little bit, but they started with the EPA's mandate or recommendation limitation of PFAS was 1 part per billion. And then if you remember, the analogy they used would be an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and 1 drop of PFAS in an Olympic-sized swimming pool would be the contaminant enough to 1 part per billion. Now, the EPA states that the minimum contamination level is 4 parts per trillion. Isn't that something? A part per billion, now it's down to 4 parts per trillion. Because PFAS, PFOs, PFAs, Gen X chemicals can accumulate over time, that's where the health risk comes in. If they don't leave our body, and they can accumulate in our body and build up in our body kidney cancer, liver cancer, thyroid cancer, testicular cancer. What if these cancer rates, especially in young people, cancer rates are increasing in young adults? What if this is from the PFAS contamination? I don't even think they begin to really, take a serious look at this. The fact that two major companies can create such a global contamination issue and still be able to, manufacture products and goods is beyond me. Because we also learned that there were, major, civil lawsuits and settlements that those companies, had to partake in based upon the damage and the waste that their product, created. The National Institute of Environmental Health and Science has shown that PFAS can be found in the blood of 97% of Americans. 97%. These chemicals can enter our bodies through contaminated water, food, and even air. So think about when you take a shower in the steam. See, we have three major problems in our water supply today. One is the PFAS. Two are pharmaceuticals. We learned also this year, or last year, that pharmaceuticals still are in the water supply. Once your body takes a medication and it's metabolized, or it's called a metabolic, and then you get rid of it by going to the restroom, that's in the water supply, and it stays in the water supply. So common sense, dying commodity in today's world. Hopefully not for too long, though. Let's think about this. If you can have a small contaminant measured in a part per trillion be harmful and hazardous to human health, what do you think medication could be at? I've always said it doesn't take a large number to have a contaminant issue or problem water. The National Science Foundation program director Anne-Marie Scholl-Manolter, pardon me for that, Anne, states the widespread presence of PFAS in the environment and their potential health effects are a major public health concern. Study that links that PFAS exposure to various health issues, including what I just mentioned, liver damage, thyroid disease, and weakened immune system, which also means that whatever vaccines that we get, it can affect, the potency of a vaccine. One of the most significant sources of PFAS exposure is drinking water contamination, and we've demonstrated in the last couple weeks that the PFAS contamination in water, especially, is not just a local concern; it's global. It's a globally concern, and even some people are stating, "Hey, don't stop eating seafood." PFAS is something that once it gets into the body, it could take a decade of you drinking and eating non-PFAS contaminated water and food for it to start reducing and actually leaving your body. So this is something that, can we take care of it? Absolutely we can. PFAS can be removed by a point of use reverse osmosis drinking water system. PFAS can also be removed by anion resin-based unit, and everything, that can remove PFAS, activated carbon is one, should really be supported by water softening. Soft water is the base for all, standard, filtration, because hard water can create havoc on water filters. The thing to also think about when we're talking about the PFAS contamination is how long it's been going on. It's generational. It's been since the mid-40s. And then you've had factories that were dumping PFAS contaminants in rivers and lakes and streams. And it's not just in the United States, and it's not just in the Midwest United States around Minneapolis and Michigan. It's all over. And then other, industrialized countries are doing the same thing, dumping it into, the oceans. And so how PFAS, accumulate around the world is through rain. Now, the other factor we have as a problem with our drinking water is the microplastics. Microplastics, so with PFAS contaminations, microplastics contamination. Microplastics were tiny particles. Plastics don't decay. They don't deteriorate. They just get smaller and smaller and smaller. There's a study done that, if you're at home and you're dusting, or if you're sitting in your chair and the sun is, shining in the window, and if you ever see the dust particles in the sunlight, that could be full of microplastics. We could be breathing those in. We have chloramine contamination, where that's used as a disinfectant in our drinking water. So there's just several issues we really need to pay attention to. And not only us, but we need to start getting the local government to put a game plan together. We know that the federal government, the EPA, has issued standards and guidelines that local municipalities are going to have to, follow by 2029. But I'm hoping that, with this new administration coming in, there's going to be a realistic approach. Because how can you filter on a major level? When I mean a major level, how can you take an 8-inch water main with the water coming in at 60, 70 gallons per minute at over, 180 to 200 PSI, and as it travels through those, the water filtration, the water treatment system through the waste treatment plant, and it's sent right back to your home. How are you going to treat that? How can that be done? Now, if water filtration media like activated carbon or aniline resin isn't treated properly, then it's not going to become useful very long. And, with aniline resin, which is very effective, that's a super sensitive filtration media that has to have soft water. Same with activated carbon. Activated carbon has to have soft water. Activated carbon is like a sponge. It's going to absorb all the organics. So how long will that last? And then what are we going to do? But here's the bigger issue. The waste treatment plants itself, with the human waste and the human waste that's contaminated with PFAS, what are we going to do with that? And how many farmlands have been contaminated with the PFAS contamination that spread to the livestock in the meat and poultry and pork that we eat? How do we know? Or is the FDA going to have a label that they're going to put on poultry and chicken, of course, poultry, pork and beef that's going to have a PFAS contamination label? So let's start with this program that we have that we want to share with you. It's from Vice News, and it's about a farmer whose farm was contaminated by PFAS, and he got that from organic, disposable waste that came from the waste treatment plants or the sewage plants. So let's go.
Take that in, Mom.
Mom, this is one.
All right, hold on. I'm trying to get him up.
There you go.
This farm has been in the Grostic name for over 100 years. We went from milking cows back in the beginning history of this farm and went to raising beef cattle and got my license to sell directly to public. You work hard for what you have, and you have a legacy, and you build for generations to get where you're at. This is all I've ever done. It's all I've wanted. It was all taken away from me in one swoop, a big business dumping PFAS down the drain. There's a reason that they're covering up what they do, because they knew.
How's it going, Jason? Gianna Taboni, thank you for having us out here.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about your family farm here.
Right now there is 71 cows out here right now. Had made a great marketplace for myself. Our sales have climbed 20-30% every year for the last 4 or 5 years. We were planning on building a storefront. I was GMO free. We want to grow a safe crop. We want to raise a safe animal. We want to raise it clean. Thought we were doing everything right.
When did this nightmare begin for you?
The nightmare itself really started probably in November of 2021. The government come to me and said they want to do a biosolid study. They come in here and did a mass testing, 400 or 500 soil samples. And then in December of 2021, they wanted meat samples.
Were you nervous at that point?
Oh yeah, I was scared. Gave them the meat samples, and a month later, they notified me that, we need to do a Zoom meeting with you on Thursday. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, no big deal. And when I got on the Zoom meeting, it was 4 people I've never met before. And the guy's like, we're so sorry this is happening, and blah, blah, blah. And I stopped him, like, what are you talking about? He goes, you don't know? And I said, no, I don't know. He goes, he says, you have PFAS in your meat.
PFAS are known as forever chemicals. They were largely introduced to the world in the 1950s by 3M, and later on, DuPont, which made Teflon.
Teflon has a great future, and its uses will be many.
As early as the 1970s, 3M discovered that the chemicals were, quote, more toxic than anticipated. An internal document from 1981 found C8, a type of PFAS, in the blood of 8 female employees. 2 of them had children with birth defects. Now, there are thousands of PFAS in nearly everything we touch or consume. They're considered some of the most persistent toxic compounds in existence. They can build up in our blood and organs when ingested and have been linked to a number of serious health problems, including thyroid disease, liver damage, cancer, and fertility issues. When they were found on Grostek's land more than a year ago, Michigan regulators shut down his farm and ordered a seizure notice. He's now barred from selling his meat indefinitely.
First time I heard about PFAS was the day that we received the seizure.
How many tractors can you get on there?
When it happened, we were good. We were selling the most meat we have. We have the most amount of animals we've ever had on this farm. We were at the farmer's market. We had a really good base of customers. I work at Livingston Educational Service Agency. We do preschool programs, and we sold meat to where I work, farm to table, and we were feeding it to the children. The next few months got a little difficult because I had to watch my husband start to sell pieces of the farm. He had to have an auction. It all got on display right here in front of our house for weeks, and then it was all gone. So just to watch him have to see that dream go away, it was really hard.
We knew right away it was the biosolids, that was the culprit of where everything was coming from. Biosolids were a great fertilizer source for us to go along with the operation.
In the early 1990s, the EPA was looking for a way to dispose of waste from wastewater treatment plants. So it recommended using biosolids, which are essentially treated sewage from homes and businesses, as fertilizer. But nearly 30 years later, in 2018, the EPA's Office of the Inspector General admitted the agency didn't know the impact that pollutants in biosolids could have on health and the environment. Regardless, states continue to offer biosolids to farmers, in some cases for free.
How much was going undetected to the city for many years, and of course, unfortunately, to the detriment of Mr. Grostek. Right. The state just wasn't doing this investigation on a whim. They didn't just pick Jason Grostek out of a hat and go to his property in the farmland in Howell, Michigan, and say, hey, let's see if PFAS is here. No, this was a lengthy, ongoing study.
In 2018, Michigan did something that had never been done before in the U.S. It tested water across the state for PFAS.
Michigan was testing the waters of the state to determine, are there high levels of PFAS in any of them, and if so, where's it coming from? And one of the bodies of water was the Huron River. Sure enough, the Huron River did have high levels of PFAS, so they tested upstream to figure out where it's coming from, and they determined there was a large amount coming from the Wixom wastewater treatment plant. So the state tested the various input points and determined that the highest test, by far, by thousands of times, was Tribar.
Tribar is an automotive supplier that makes parts for big names in the auto industry, including Ford.
And did they know that they were doing that?
I guess what I would tell you is the law says it doesn't matter. The law says that if you didn't know, shame on you. If you did know, shame on you. But the point is, you got to know it's in your waste. If you are going to dump toxic industrial waste into a wastewater treatment plant, you have to know what's in it.
An internal memo obtained by Vice News shows that Tribar was using PFAS chemicals in its chrome plating plant since at least 2008, and that Tribar did not test for the chemicals. Local regulations did not require them to. So when Jason Grostek first accepted biosolids from the state of Michigan in 2010, it was contaminated with the chemicals coming out of Tribar.
Right here, paragraph 11. The monitoring and testing data of Tribar manufacturing discharges shows that Tribar has violated its wastewater discharge permit.
In August 2022, Grostek filed a lawsuit against Tribar for millions of dollars. An early estimate put soil remediation alone at more than $600 million.
We've got grant money from the government that's buying us feed, but that still doesn't begin to cover the extra costs of doing business the way we're doing business. It gets tougher every day wanting to do it because there's no income from it.
What's the last year been like for you?
I tell people now it's like dying of cancer. It's there and you don't know when it's going to happen. Realistically, I don't think I have a future anymore. Nobody's ever going to buy meat from me again.
Are you all planning for what 5 months from now looks like?
No. It scares the shit out of me. It's all I've ever done. I built a reputation to sell beef and build, for lack of better terms, an empire that my kids could run. And now there's nothing. You ready, bud?
Okay, so I want to take a quick interruption. And so one of the things that I want to share with you is clearly PFAS contamination is a concern for cancer. One of the things that, the study has also linked PFAS contamination, possibly linking to brain, esophagus, and skin cancers. So I've always talked to you guys about the National Primary Drinking Water Regulation. And what I want to focus on top of what we're hearing today regarding PFAS contamination, is there are 4 main contaminants that are disinfection byproducts that are used in drinking water disinfection. So that means that they add these contaminants as part of water sanitation. So when you take the fecal matter and the urine, so let's call that sewage, not to be gross, but that's what it is. When we take that out of the water, they use one of the contaminants is bromate, a byproduct of drinking water disinfection, and increased risk of cancer. And then, the maximum contamination level. This is in milligrams per liter, which is 0.010. Now, keep in mind that, again, is another contaminant, part of the disinfection byproducts that we have to worry about, along with the PFAS contamination. Chlorite, a byproduct of drinking water disinfection. Anemia in infants and young children, and then affects the nervous system. That's at 1 milligram per liter. Total trihalomethanes. That is a byproduct from drinking water. It's the chlorination, the chloramine, and then that mixed with organics create trihalomethanes. That can create liver, kidney or central nervous system problems, and increased risk of cancer, on top of the PFAS contamination. There are studies also, they're concerned that PFAS can be absorbed through the skin. PFAS, a study out of the University of Notre Dame found that elevated levels of PFAS in the fitness tracker and smartwatch bands. That was in July of 2024. Okay, look, let's pick it back up.
Who do you blame in all this?
I want to say I blame the government for allowing sludge to be applied to the farmland, but really I blame corporate America the worst, because they get away with anything they want. They can dump stuff down the drain, they can poison this, they can do that, and nothing ever happens to them. I'm mixing up the feed so the cows can eat it. It'll never be the same old, bud.
When Michigan found that Tri-Bar was a source of PFAS contamination, they asked the company to install filters, and it worked initially.
Please leave your message for 248. The subscriber you have dialed is not in service. Your call has been forwarded.
So hard to get any of these guys on the phone.
But Vice News spent nearly a year investigating Tri-Bar's environmental record and found a pattern of serious violations, some of which are still happening today.
Okay, this one, right?
We spoke with more than a dozen former and current employees at Tri-Bar. They all requested anonymity.
Could you introduce yourself in a way that will maintain your anonymity? Anything you can tell us about your role at Tri-Bar?
I was in a management role with a very intricate knowledge of the inner workings.
Why did you eventually decide to leave?
You know, you have a moral and ethic code. You have your reputation. I wanted to leave with it intact.
People just seem really terrified of speaking out. Why is that?
It wouldn't be very uncommon for someone to be fired or laid off or be threatened to be sued by Tri-Bar.
The company has a lot of environmental and health issues inside the plants. They weren't buying the chemicals they needed to keep the line running safe.
You have very toxic and hazardous chemicals that have a specific process that they need to go through, and people that were very critical to daily operations started leaving.
Why is that? And what effect does that have on the operation there?
At one point in time, these were two separate companies. You had Adapt Plastic Finishing and you had Tri-Bar Manufacturing. You know, those were privately owned by two individuals. And at some point in time, they were acquired by this private equity group called HCI.
HCI Equity Partners, a Washington, D.C. based firm, acquired Tri-Bar in 2015. According to employees, that's when things got even worse.
Obviously, with a new equity firm taking over, we noticed cost cutting.
How quickly did you notice it?
Immediately.
So what was the priority for them?
Money. Finances.
Did that priority, in some cases, impact environment, health and safety of the community?
Everything. Yes, it was all money driven.
The quality of work that people were proud of doing was being compromised, and they were being asked to cut corners and do things faster and efficiently.
How does that affect safety and, health, really, of the community?
When people are leaving and especially not being replaced with the adequate help. For example, the environmental guy, to my knowledge, never really had any experience. I mean, he was a shipping clerk before he took on this, what I would consider a major role within the company. You're creating an environment that is just a ticking time bomb.
Tri-Bar did not accept repeated interview requests. In a statement, Tri-Bar and HCI said that they have invested more than $42 million in their facilities and equipment, including sophisticated environmental controls. They also said, quote, "No one has been fired or laid off for identifying a potential issue. However, multiple sources told Vice News that they are still concerned with how the company handles PFAS chemicals.
Processes like the granular activated carbon system for the PFAS. The whole reason for that GAC system is for PFAS remediation.
So this is a carbon filtering system that strips the PFAS out of the wastewater.
Exactly. When that GAC system is running the way it's supposed to, that outcome for PFAS is non-detect.
They're claiming that the GAC system catches it all, but if the GAC system is plugged, it doesn't catch it all.
Why isn't the GAC system working properly to filter it out?
If they don't maintain it and clean it.
And you saw
Okay, so I want to interrupt right there. So granular activated carbon was effective in removing the PFAS as stated by the EPA, but if it's not maintained properly, it doesn't do anything. And then it could release more PFAS. It could go in reverse because it's an exhausted media. Once it becomes exhausted, it has to be disposed. And it's a hot item. It's full of contaminant. So activated carbon absolutely will work. The problem is how many gallons of water can activated carbon filter before that filter media is exhausted and no longer will function properly. That's something that company obviously didn't think about or maintain. But then now let's go to the bigger scale. What's a municipality going to do? Activated carbon is one item that will absolutely reduce the PFAS. We'll remove it to a non-detectable level, which is great news for us. This is what we need. Now, you can use an activated carbon filtration system in your home. You absolutely can. Reverse osmosis is something that will absolutely work as well. However, hard water is a determining factor. We know in Michigan they have hard water. They have iron content. So if they weren't going through pre-filtration, if they weren't feeding that activated carbon with soft water, then that activated carbon got full and then it stopped working.
And you saw that firsthand?
They didn't get me to say I saw it firsthand, so I can assume.
Did you feel pressure from executives to keep the plant going when things weren't going well?
Yes, and Ford Motor Company.
What did that pressure look like?
It has to happen. You can't shut us down. We parked 70,000 vehicles along the fence at Ford because they couldn't make parts.
They're not making parts. They're not making money. It's all their push is to make it run, make it run, make it run.
And in order to run, they got to get that wastewater out.
That is correct.
Doesn't Tri-Bar have to abide by certain regulations around what levels of PFAS have to be at before water is released?
They do, but conveniently, every document for the past 24 months is missing. I've seen them. I've put hands on them. Then the day the investigators come in, they're gone. Gone. Nobody knows where they are.
So if you lost them, how can they hold you accountable to what you actually did? I was approached to sign off on some documentation that had to be turned into Eagle, and I said, this isn't right. This account here is not correct. And I was told, doesn't matter, sign the document so we can turn it in, and I refused to sign. I told them I'm not putting my name on anything that's falsified, and it was probably within a couple weeks of that the treatment started where it was, we're not sure you're the right person for this job.
Was there any question in your mind why they were starting to treat you that way?
No, I knew exactly why they were doing it. They were doing it because I wouldn't sign my name to the documentation.
Tri-Bar denies failing to properly document or respond to environmental concerns. In a statement, they said they will, quote, continue to take our responsibility as a good corporate citizen very seriously. But Eagle, Michigan's environmental agency, confirmed they have issued Tri-Bar 15 different violations in the last year, including for missing documentation and for not keeping accurate records. Eagle did say Tri-Bar's PFAS emissions were in compliance with state regulations in 2022.
Why did you decide to do this interview?
Anything we discharge potentially can get into a waterway that now leads to someone's home, and it's affecting lives long term. And there's children that are growing up with birth defects. There's children that are going to grow up with cancers they don't even know about right now because of PFAS. And somehow my company glosses over and says, I'll eat the fine, don't worry about it.
If you lose your job over this, will it have been worth it?
I'd do it any day.
Down.
Mortgage bill, property taxes, membership dues for MCA, loader payment, skid loader payment, health insurance, all in grand total, on an average every month, $8,000.
Basics. And if I don't start getting some money income real soon, it's not going to last much longer.
The stress, it's ridiculous. It really is. Not knowing every day. I had concerns that he could have hurt himself because he was so depressed, not knowing what was going to happen. I worried, like, if he went down and do chores, if he was going to come back. Because you hear about it all the time. Farmers taking their own lives. And I asked him straight up, I said, I need to know, like, have you thought about this? Is this something on your mind? Because we have kids. And he said, no way. No way.
Does your wife have good reason to worry about you?
Yes and no. I mean,
When Grosdick's farm was shut down, he had already sold hundreds of pounds of meat to multiple customers.
You're going to want to watch your step. They're really steep. They're old.
Okay, so I want to add a couple things. The next segment that we're going to play, we'll talk about a customer that purchased the meat, his thoughts, and then it's going to get interesting. It's going to talk about a former employee and the contamination of residents and farmland. In a recap, 3M is basically the center of the PFAS controversy. So in 2021 and 2022, 3M reported that it sold more than 20,000 products that contain PFAS in the United States. Scotchgard is a well-known brand of fabric and upholstery, protects the fabric from water resistant. That's what's PFAS. Firefighting foam, as we mentioned, industrial cleaners. Certain industrial cleaning products have used, and that's exactly what this company that manufactured, chrome and automotive parts in Michigan. That's PFAS. Electronic parts also come coated with PFAS, so that's contamination when those electronic parts are disposed of, and they are put in our landfill. 3M announced in December of 2022 that it would stop making PFAS and discontinue using them in products by the end of 2025. So they're still producing them today. It's important to note that 3M has phased out products of some long-chain PFAS, such as PFOs and PFOS, and have been working on alternatives. And some of the alternatives are now, already outlawed by the EPA, and those are the Gen X chemicals. So the EPA, in 2024 outlined Gen X chemicals as being harmful, and for them to be discontinued in use. Anything that you have a water repellent for fabrics. So we have lawn furniture that has cushions in our lawn furniture. Anything that's water repellent is a PFAS. The other concerning thing is the PFAS in food packaging, and one of the things that got me was the PFAS that are in the popcorn and the microwave popcorn bags. That's troubling. And then the plastics PFAS are in food wraps, plastic wraps. So it's a double whammy, isn't it? You got the plastic wrap that creates microplastic, and inside the plastic is a PFAS coating that's water resistant to keep moisture out of the packaging. So this next segment is going to be very interesting, and one of the things that they're going to talk about is farm contamination, but you're going to listen to a lady, her and her husband bought a Christmas tree farm. He died of liver cancer, and she's going to talk about having her blood tested for PFAS. It's very fascinating.
This is what's left of the last cow. Well, there's some pig in here too, but...
So this is meat that you got from Grosdick's farm?
Both the pork and the beef, yes.
Okay.
And we've been eating his meat now for 7 years, I believe.
So what was it like to first learn that, these chemicals were in it?
What would it do to me was the first question, which I never really got an answer to. The other thing was, is it going to kill us to eat it?
Are you guys still eating this meat?
Yes, we are.
How'd you make that decision?
Well, at this point, we've already eaten the worst. Why stop?
Do you know what the levels of PFAS are in this meat?
Well, yeah, the state had just sent me, I finally got the paperwork today showing the levels. These two are this cow in here.
4.02 parts per billion, is that right?
Yeah.
And so do you know what that means?
No, not really.
So the state sent you this, but they don't tell you what it means?
No, basically this is what they sent me.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the Department of Agriculture both have not set PFAS limits in food or livestock. But the European Union has. Based on their guidance, a person eating a pound of meat from John Tischert's freezer would be exposed to about 5 times more than the weekly recommendation.
I mean, the one thing that is clear is all this meat has PFAS in it.
Yes.
So correct. What are you going to do?
I'm not real sure what we're going to do yet. We are talking about moving to a place where we can raise a couple cows and take care of it ourselves.
Grosdick's case is not an isolated incident. Nationwide, about 20 million acres of U.S. cropland might be contaminated by biosolids, according to a recent estimate. But the real total is unknown, and experts say could be much higher.
We're in East China, Michigan, which is right on the Canadian border, and we're here to meet a chemical engineer who worked with DuPont for more than 40 years. And since retiring, she's switched teams. She now works with environmental groups to help them understand the impact of forever chemicals.
I worked 42 years for DuPont. I worked the summer in 1976. That's the summer I got pregnant with my oldest, and that I worked in Teflon. They thought of it as the cleanest place in the plant, best place to work. Our site was the sole supplier of Teflon for food contact until 1985. So it's a great history, right? At this point.
To better understand how many farms have been affected by PFAS contamination, Denise Trabick-Pointer started tracking where biosolids have been spread in Michigan. So far, she's mapped hundreds of sites.
We're looking at lower Michigan right now. The red are wastewater treatment plants. Blue is where biosolids have been land applied. So I started adding things like tanneries. Paper mills are another. They use their residuals to land apply also. Over 2,100 locations likely to have PFAS.
So this is Jason Grosdick's farm? What do these other surrounding dots represent?
These are other farms. These
that have used biosolids?
Yes, very highly contaminated biosolids. They used it for years. The same biosolids.
Wow. So he's really not an outlier. Obviously, the state of Michigan has tested Grosdick's farm. Have they tested other farms?
As far as I know, they haven't tested any of the other farms.
MPART, the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, confirmed that they have no plans of testing other farms, unless the agency's ongoing work identifies new toxic areas.
So there's the Jack Pine's property.
Jack Pine is a pork farm in western Michigan and one of the sites tracked by Trabick-Pointer. In the 1990s, they used waste coming from a leather tannery as fertilizer. More than 30 years later, testing of the farm's soil showed levels of PFOS 5 times higher than those found on Jason Grostick's land.
PFOA and PFOS are two well-known PFAS. If you can detect it, it's too much. They know it's in the fields. They know it was in the pig's water. They know that it was probably in some of the food that they ate, but they never tested the animal's manure or the pigs. Way over there is some of the hog buildings. These are in operation.
Because Michigan regulators didn't test the hogs from Jack Pine, they could continue selling them. The impact this has had on America's food supply is unknown. According to internal notes from Eagle, there might not be records of the animals after they were slaughtered and moved to the food chain. To date, the state has only tested animal products at Grostick's farm. That's unsurprising. Testing of any kind could show more contamination. During the 2019 National PFAS Conference, a state official admitted as much, saying that testing milk would put farmers out of business.
The problem of trying to dig this up is once you dig it up, where are you going to put it? I don't even dislike Ohio that much that I'd send it there. My husband Joel and I, we bought our first home. We thought it was our dream home. It was literally surrounded by Christmas trees. It turned out that Christmas tree farm was actually a place that dumped tannery waste for years and years and years. So it got into the water and it's contaminated 25 square miles of my community. Besides knowing what's in my water, I wanted to know what's in my blood. It costs $800 to test your blood. And I was hearing, don't worry about it. It's got minor health things. You don't need to worry. I looked at them then and said, my husband just died of liver cancer. My blood came back at 5 million parts per trillion. So I have some of the highest levels of PFAS, I guess, in the world. Though I don't think it's a contest. I went in for a thyroid ultrasound. I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer that had metastasized to my lymph nodes. I had to have 23 lymph nodes removed and a thyroidectomy. And I just had my blood tested again. And now I'm down to a measly 3.5 million parts per trillion. So at this point, if I live to be 240, I am good.
Life has enough worries, and then you have to go home and go, oh, wow, you can't drink the water. Is it really safe to take a shower? Is it really safe to water your dogs? Is it really safe? But what is somebody going to do? There's nothing to get it out of your system. Why didn't somebody acknowledge or tell us? Because obviously they've known for a while.
This field here probably has not been exposed to biosolids, I'm going to say, in probably 10 or 12 years. We no longer allowed to let our cattle be on this pasture because of this stupid PFAS in my soil. You don't get to see it, you don't smell it, you don't know it, but it's here.
So you know of farmers who are still using biosolids?
Yes. There's several guys that still use it that I know of locally.
I mean, knowing the risks, why are people still using it?
It's free. It's free nutrients. That is $30,000 that I saved not buying commercial fertilizer.
And the government's telling you it's safe, why not?
Right. I mean, the EPA is the one that said that biosolids should be applied to farmland.
In 2021, Michigan became one of the first states to regulate the concentration of PFOS in biosolids. Recently proposed federal regulations regarding PFAS in drinking water will limit only 6 types of forever chemicals. But advocates are pushing to regulate PFAS as a class because variations of the chemicals continue to show up in water testing reports.
So
let's update that. There's now 147,000 known chemicals that the EPA has now recognized to be regulated and as a goal to be reduced out of drinking water, and it's down to 4 part per trillion. So you heard the number that was in the lady's blood, the contamination of her blood. It's down for the drinking water down to 4 parts per trillion. But the greater issue is the soil contamination and all the unknown agricultural land that's still being used now and dairy cows. Unknown PFAS contamination. It's something that we really need to look at on a grand scale. So agricultural, communities could be unaware. You have dairy farms all over northern Colorado. You go northern Colorado outside of Greeley and you head east and there's dairy farms all over the place. Do we know if that land's been contaminated? And there's another issue that we have at dairy farms, right? Dairy farms can, have high nitrates, and then nitrogen is another issue that can contaminate water supplies as well. So if you live on well water, you definitely, need to think about your contamination is just as equal to somebody that lives in a municipal water supply. The problem that when you're on well water, you don't know what's contaminated. You don't know what you have. It's a great idea to get tested. But now there's a problem. The state of Colorado can no longer test water because their lab had scientists, lab techs, that fudged numbers. The EPA came in and shut them down only because they had no choice because the EPA was coming to reaccreditate the lab. And then they had to admit that, hey, we fudged results. And now they found a second individual that was fudging results. So now the state of Colorado no longer tests water. That's sad, isn't it? So you have to go to outside agencies or companies, to get your water tested. And when you do that, I definitely recommend that you take your own sample into those companies. Do not hire somebody, a third party, to collect the sample for you. You do it yourself. You don't want somebody using lab results to try to scare you into buying their water treatment equipment. That, I think, is unethical. Now, you can take your lab results and share them with somebody like us, and we'll be more than happy to go over with you the results and discuss options how to treat the contaminations that you're concerned about. So what you can do for your water is definitely do a point of use reverse osmosis. They mentioned activated carbon is absolutely another method, but you want to have a filter that's designed to handle PFAS, but also it all starts with how hard is your water. Hard water absolutely will affect the quality of those water filters, meaning the longevity, how long they will last. Hard water will eat them up. Hardness is a liquid that as it oxidizes, it converts to a scale, and then that scale is going to build up around that filter, and then the water will not absorb or go through the filter. The filter won't absorb the water for the proper filtration. So that's something that we definitely want to think about. We'll continue with this story next week. We have other stories I want to share with you, but, in the few remaining minutes we have, it's just amazing to recap the problems that we have with our water supplies. So we definitely have the PFAS forever chemicals. This was a bigger issue than I thought. I'll share with you personally. When I was listening last spring, to the EPA webinar. So we had customers that contacted us from Adams County and Denver County. They received letters saying that, hey, the water tested higher than what was recommended on the PFAS contamination. However, they didn't go in depth on what the contamination concerns were, and nor did the EPA in the webinar share with us how we got to this, contamination. Did they mention, 3M, and did they mention DuPont? No, they didn't. They just said it was something that because of, chemicals in manufacturing since World War II. But the greater story was this was a well-known contamination issue that was so what, and they kept on making and using these products. And to the point I just shared with you, they're still making these products until the end of 2025. Isn't that amazing? They're going to still use a contamination that they know is cancer-causing, and they're still going to produce products with this contaminant to 2025. Unbelievable. And we just heard the story of that lady. Can you imagine the numbers, of the part per billion that she has contaminant in the PFAS? And her husband dying of liver cancer, and then, the surgeries that she had to have, and she still has high levels. It doesn't go away. Do we know what our PFAS levels are in ourselves? No, we don't, do we? Is it something that should we ask, when we go to the doctor and they get blood work, can we, should we ask them, can we do a PFAS test on our blood to see where we're at? I think that's something that we should really think about. So remember, clean water is up to us. I definitely recommend, give us a call at Water Pros or, 303-862-5554. We definitely can help you out with, PFAS mitigation, forever chemicals. We got pharmaceuticals. That's the other issue I'm concerned about. Hormones in the water, antibiotics in the water, puberty blockers in the water. Then these microplastics, and microplastics become nanoplastics. It's just never ending. So it really is up to us, isn't it, to take seriously the quality of our drinking water. And then the next step, I think we probably should be responsible and when ask if your medical provider can do a blood work and blood test on PFAS. I think that's the only right thing to do. Well, listen, thank you very much for joining us. I sure appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great weekend, and I look forward to, we'll pick this back up next week. Take care. God bless.
Remember to reach out to Paul the Waterman with your questions and water filtration needs, and be sure to tune in to Water Talk Thursdays at 2 p.m. to talk with Paul. And for more information, find him on the programming page at klzradio.com.